Hello Dragon Wisps, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be doing part 4 of the skills tutorials for Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 edition. I do apologize for not having done this sooner. As I've mentioned before, summer is really not a good time for me when it comes to recording. It's too hot to record in the car, kids are both home all the time, but school has started back up, so now I'm operating again in the capacity that I was before. So when I get a day off or a half day, which is much more likely than a day off, I take a little bit of time out, record, good to go. So hopefully I can continue doing this and pump these out faster. Anyway, before we begin, I'd like to remind you to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet to become a Dragon Wisp. And if you would like to support the channel more directly, you can do so at the Patreon in the description below. If you would like to join the Discord channel, however, feel free to comment. I will put up a temporary link so that you can join, and you can play some Dungeons & Dragons with us, talk about Dungeons & Dragons, ask questions about Dungeons & Dragons. Honestly, it is the easiest way to get a hold of me. Anyway, without further ado, sit back, relax, and let's go through part 4 for the skills for 3.5 edition Dungeons & Dragons. Ambient sound. Alright, so I'm thinking I might just cover the knowledges in this video, because there are a lot of knowledges, and I feel that knowledge is one of those skills that people tend to neglect the premise behind it, like the potential for it. So for example, a lot of people, like let's say if they have knowledge local, they'll only use it to see if they know anything about like the area, but there's so much more in depth that you can go. Alright, so knowledge is an intelligence-based skill and can only be used trained. Now there are a couple of special circumstances. For example, bards come equipped with bardic knowledge, which means they can make a base check on any knowledges, which is, I've mentioned it before, but I'll go back and take a look again, because I don't entirely remember. Bardic knowledge. Alright, so a bard, to use bardic knowledge, it is a bonus equal to their bard level and their intelligence modifier to see if they've picked up any information. This represents the fact that bards go town to town, play a little bit on their lute in the taverns, like they overhear a lot of stuff. So that's where they would gain, like, some might even say obscure knowledge of things. So that's one of the special cases. Anyway, so like the craft and profession skill, knowledge has to be taken, and it covers a whole bunch of different areas. So like with profession in craft, so like we've covered craft already, so we'll go over craft. So with craft, you would have like an armor smith or a fletcher or stonework or metalwork, things like that. That's a lot how knowledge works, so you need to take them individually. Now there are a couple of ones in the supplemental books that aren't covered here, but we're not going to go over the supplemental stuff. We're going over the basic stuff because we're learning what all the basics that are needed when making a character. The more you play, the more advanced stuff you can get into. And the knowledge skill itself represents that you've studied specific parts of lore, legends, myths even, or in some cases scientific books covering like anatomy and stuff. You could have gone to an academy or just followed a scientific discipline. But realistically, the majority of it is dependent upon like your class. Like a wizard, for example, is going to have studied the arcane. A cleric will have studied religion, sort of things. All right. And with your DM's approval, you can create new areas of knowledge. That basically means you're getting your DM involved during character creation, because you want to discuss like certain options that are available to you. Now, the more advanced you get, you might get into homebrewed classes and things if your DM allows them in their campaigns, and that is another thing you need to discuss with your DM, but that's something entirely different that we'll probably cover after all of this, like all the basics are covered. Anyway, so to do a knowledge check, generally your DC changes things depending on like realistically how much study has gone into it or how obscure the knowledge is. So answering a question within your field of study has a DC of 10 for really easy questions, 15 for basic questions, 20 to 30 for really tough questions. Your DM can also make information like practically unheard of, so you would have really had to be paying attention in the tavern, for example. In many cases, and this is where a lot of people don't utilize the knowledge skills, you can use this skill to identify monsters, special powers, and their vulnerabilities. So generally, your DC would be a 10 plus the monster's hit dice. A successful check allows you to remember a bit of useful information about that monster, and then for every 5 points above, the DM can give you additional pieces of useful information. So like let's say you just hit it. Well, that's a fire elemental. You get 5 above. They come from the fire, like the flame planes. You get more than that. They're weak against frost. You get more than that, and so on and so forth. Let's say you do really well. You get like 20 above or more. It can be you can start to get into more specific stuff like this particular fire elemental is known as Calcifer. He was a fire, like he was bound to a wizard long ago. Blah 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 blah, and this is his weak spot specifically. Let's hit that spot right there. You know, obviously, fire elemental is not the best example for scoring really high on knowledge, but you know, it was an example. Things like that. Usually, it doesn't take any actions, because you know you're making a knowledge check, so you either know the answer or you don't. There can be some cases where it's like really trying to specifically remember one particular detail, which might take a bit longer. DM's discretion, obviously. You don't get to try again. Because, again, you either know it or you don't know it. If you don't know it, you just flat out don't know it. If you have 5 or more ranks in Knowledge Arcana, you get a +2 bonus on spellcraft checks. If you have 5 or more ranks in Knowledge Architecture and Engineering, you get a +2 bonus on search checks to find hidden doors or secret compartments. If you have 5 or more ranks in Knowledge Geography, you get a +2 on survival checks to keep from being lost or avoid natural hazards. If you have 5 or more ranks in Knowledge History, you get a +2 bonus on bardic knowledge checks. And if you have 5 or more ranks in Knowledge Local, you get a +2 bonus on gather information checks. Now, we're going to go into the specific knowledges that are represented in the core rulebook. First one is Arcana. This is your magic and everything. And as I'm listening to these, I'm going to be listing specific creatures that this would apply to, for, again, that extended version of the knowledge check. So Arcana covers ancient mysteries, magic traditions, arcane symbols, cryptic phrases, constructs, dragons, and magical beasts. Next we have Architecture and Engineering, which covers buildings, aqueducts, bridges, and fortifications. That one doesn't really cover monsters, but I'm sure, depending on your DM, they might allow it to apply to constructs, or perhaps animated objects. Dungeoneering covers your aberrations, caverns, oozes, and spelunking. Well, that's a bit of a dark hole, but let's roll it. We could probably get down there with some rope, grappling hooks, some climbing spikes, stuff like that. Geography covers the land, terrain, the climate, and the people. So, again, that doesn't cover many monsters, but it can give you the information you need regarding specific areas. History, royalty, wars, colonies, migrations, the founding of cities. So again, that is another one that doesn't cover monsters, but will give you a lot of information to help you along your way. A lot of people I know, they don't take knowledge history, they just rely on a bard. Local, legends, personalities, inhabitants, laws, customs, traditions, and humanoids. This is where it gets real tricky because, a lot of the monsters have the humanoid subtype. So you'd be able to use knowledge local to study it, like to know their weak spots. Nature covers animals, fae, giants, monstrous humanoids, plants, seasons, cycles, weather, and vermin. Got a problem with dire rat? Knowledge nature is the way to go. Nobility and royalty covers lineages, heraldry, family trees, mottos, and personalities. I think paladin might be the only ones in the base rules that get that, which kind of makes sense for a paladin. Religion covers your gods and goddesses, obviously, mythic history, ecclesiastic tradition, holy symbols, and the make of undead. And then the planes. That covers your inner planes, outer planes, astral plane, ethereal plane, outsiders, elementals, like your flame elemental, magic related to the planes. So, like I said, this does cover a lot more area than people tend to use them for, but that's up to your discretion, realistically. Now, one thing that needs to be covered when it comes to knowledge, and this is an important one because eventually you're going to be role-playing this character. You need to know the difference between player knowledge and character knowledge, okay? If the party approaches a sewer that somebody had told one of the characters is currently being used as a breeding ground for were-rats, the character would know that. The challenge rating for were-rats and whether or not you're ready to fight them, that would be character knowledge and your player knowledge. Your character might not necessarily know whether or not you can do it. Another example is, okay, we've got a 20-foot gap here. We don't know what's down there. So our options are to jump across or try to find another way. That's as much as the character knows. The player knows, alright, well, the DM's not going to give us an impossible jump or an area with no way around it so that we can potentially fall to our doom. So let's just jump. It's not gonna. A character. I've been wearing down this troll for about an hour. Eventually, something's got to give. Let's say this character knows nothing about trolls, right? Player. Hey, you know what? Let's just use fire acid and then stop it from regenerating, and then we'll have no problem. So like you need to know where to toe that line, that the character would know this versus the character wouldn't know this, but the player knows. We actually had an incident with a player years ago where the DM said, okay, so just so you guys know, next session you guys are going to be going up against a dragon. I just don't want you guys to be surprised when it happens. You're not going to know when it happens, though. And then this player decided every 5 steps his character was checking for dragons. We had no game interaction whatsoever to indicate that a dragon was anywhere nearby. And the player actually argued with us that, oh, no, because we were told, our characters know to be careful. No, it doesn't work like that. We've done this adventure twice before. We know where we're supposed to go. Player knowledge. Characters. This actually seems like a decent direction to go. Might be the wrong way, might be the right way, but it's what the characters would do. And that ultimately is what you need to remember when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons. You may be a player who has knowledge of every nook and cranny of the game, but you need to remember that you are playing as your character. Like, let's say you replay a Final Fantasy game for the 20th time. You know what's coming. The characters in the game don't know what's coming. Yes, you can prepare for it when you're like making your character, building your character, but ultimately it does come down to character knowledge. Anyway, that covers that. Like I said, it's been a long video and I've only covered the knowledge skill, so like I said, it's an extensive skill. Once you've mastered that skill, so many doors open up. And I personally don't play bards, but I have seen it done where nobody in the party took any knowledges except for the bard character. And even then, his bardic knowledge was solving every single problem because his intelligence was high enough. So it's a double-edged sword. Like, it can hinder you, but it can very much get you to a point where it's almost broken the game, how much it helps. Anyway, thank you for joining me for part 4 of the skills tutorials for Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 edition. Again, we're covering things in the core rules. We're not covering supplemental right now, but I hope it was informative for you. Feel free to comment any questions you have regarding the knowledge skill below. And as I've stated in my previous tutorial videos, comment any questions you have in general, and I will do my best to answer them. Again, though, if you'd like to get a hold of me more directly, just comment that you'd like to join the Discord, let me know, and we can move from there. Anyway, so right about now, you should be getting the usual subscribe button up here, video recommended for you, latest video on the channel over here, video recommended for you by YouTube over here, and over here will be the playlist of Dungeons & Dragons tutorials in case there is anything you haven't watched to cover some bases. Thank you for joining me, and as always, have a peaceful day. Bye.